border crossings. A deceptively simple stand, jump, or a simply deceptive journey in the dead, dark night. Comparisons, companionships.
Then I saw the women from the eastern world come walking across the desert from their homeland in the search for something better. And my answers to their questions didn't measure to their strength. And someone murdered someone, and the money had all been spent, and the cause had all been working for got swallowed in the greed. And I thought about these women and their struggle to be free while I'd been dreaming, only dreaming. I'd been dreaming, dreaming, only dreaming. Well, do you wonder what it means? All these pictures in my dreams, all the yearning and the fear and all the terrors and the screams. I can still feel the devil round the corner of my memory, and he's waiting for a woman who won't stand up and be kind to. And I know there's others like me, afraid to have their say, simply sitting back and hoping that it all will be okay. But that's just dreaming. We're just dreaming, only dreaming, dreaming, only dreaming. And I know there's others like me, afraid to have their say, simply sitting back and hoping that it all will be okay. But that's just dreaming. We're just dreaming, only dreaming. We're just dreaming. Ooh.
Beautiful, Phil, beautiful. Well, I'm delighted to be joined by two wonderful women, or maybe it's me that's joining them because they have already been joined in artistic collaboration before this. Fil Cambell from the border town of Balleek in County Fermanagh, and Csilla Toldy, not a border town but a town that's joined together. In fact, there's two towns. Csilla.
Yes, it's Buda and Pest.
How did that division come about?
By the Danube. So, so the hilly side is the Buda side and Pest is the flat side on the other side of the Danube.
Right, and Csilla's a poet, a wonderful poet too. And on the programme tonight, we're talking about both of your journeys from two different places, ending up here in the County Down, and all the staging posts along the way where we will stop and add your artistic impressions of those moments. But there's a poem about a cafe.
Yes, there's a coffee culture in Budapest. This is decadent Budapest, as if the trees have acknowledged that knowing is hindsight and time passed without seizing the moment. Just looking back, just looking back. Stripped of the madness of summer, the trees graciously undress, dropping each leaf with playful tease. The low sunshine is still mellow, but the early morning nips. Frost varnishes the grass. The city is a veil like a waterfall around you. The noise shrouds our senses. Even though we do not talk, I can see you for a fleeting moment. We do not exchange small talk or greetings. We touch each other with our eyes, or mumble a pardon or sorry, no time for smiles, yet the heart is naked. Bitter double espresso with a small glass of water, a thick layer of sugar at the bottom of my cup. In the cafe, an old lady plays the piano. She sends big smiles to young lovers. Hamvadó cigaretta vég. Budapest is a lace. The streets have two names, the old and the older. The Danube connects and divides. Bullet holes in the walls remind. Avenues of theaters, cabaret and casino. The old gypsy on his way home carrying a cello. Budapest is you and me, with revolutions to remember. Just looking back, just looking back.
Beautiful. Just looking back, Phil. A line in the poem talks about a street with two names. Something familiar about that.
Yeah, the different names of places. It's funny, I was thinking about a street today. I'm wondering where the name came from. It's called Bonnahill. There was a road just behind us, and it feels like a mixture of the Irish and the English.
There was a hard border between Sheila and yourself before you met up. A hard border known as the Iron Curtain to some. A defence against capitalism to another. A very sophisticated border. How sophisticated was the border in County Fermanagh between north and south where you lived?
Where I grew up, the border was what was known as a sheugh.
A sheugh?
Yeah, a wee stream for you uneducated ones of the things. A sheugh, which was just really like a wee stream between two fields, and that marked the border.
Was it legal to cross the sheugh?
Well, it was, if you went the proper way, you had to go through customs, but you could just jump across it. Well, the big boys could jump across the water. When you were young, you weren't allowed to jump across it. But there was a lane not far from our house, about 50 yards from the house, which became an unapproved road, and it crossed the border. So we were about a field from.
I want to talk about that in a while, because fantastic, really, the differences and the similarities. How can I put this? Usually in the north of Ireland, stroke Northern Ireland here, we don't ask people what is their religion, because we know anyway from H's and H's and Hail Marys and many other things as well. But what's your own background?
Well, I grew up completely without religion because I grew up in a socialist system. So atheism was the religion of the land. But actually, my father was brought up in a Catholic tradition, and my granny was very devout Catholic, and she had 10 children. My father was number one of the 10. So my mother is a Protestant, but they didn't go to church when she was a child. They just prayed at home, and then later on she became an atheist, and she didn't care about religion at all. But now at her old age, she's 88 now, she's returning to her religion, so to the comfort of believing. And when I was about 14 years old, she gave me the Bible and said that this is an important book, read it and decide for yourself whether you want to believe it or not. So this was my religious upbringing.
You were a little bit of a rebel in all directions towards being told what to do in a way. There's a beautiful line in your one of your poems about the Russians thought we were Nazis, but we weren't. We were only doing what we were told, just like going to church on the Sunday.
Yes.
And I suppose then you were being told something different.
Yes.
And something different again.
Yeah, I mean, at home people went to church during the socialist regime as well, but it was kind of illegal. And at the school we learned about revolutions after revolutions, so the dialectic materialism it's called.
Your mother had seen Lenin too.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
She was given a trip to Moscow when she was before I was born actually, but she kept telling me this story that she was in the mausoleum and she saw Lenin's embalmed body, and then she told me this grisly story that his beard and hair is still growing and he has his own private barber who is coming I don't know, maybe monthly to cut his hairs. So this was very inspirational for me, and I actually wrote a story about it.
So even beyond death, he was still growing.
He's still growing, yeah, so he never stops.
Yeah, he's sort of the great legend, hero type of thing in that situation. I want to talk about how you left and how that all happened. But when you were growing up at that time, we would have had the likes of communion or confirmation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You got some photographs from that time.
I have,
Phil.
indeed, yeah. That was a real ritual of passage, really. Apart from the fact that you got a little bag to collect money with them, that was the main objective of it,
Yes,
for
right.
children. But yeah, it was a big occasion, and it was sort of like the rite of passage, and then on to confirmation when you got a little bit older.
In your country, in the Eastern Bloc at that time, there was another kind of rite of passage with, was it the blue flag and the
No,
red?
the first one was at the age of 6, and when you became a little drummer. That was the
drummer.
drummer, yes. And you
You've
got
a certain amount of that here too.
you got a blue kerchief and you wore it when for celebrations at school. And then at the age of 12, there was a red kerchief which you got, and then you became a pioneer.
Right, so it was, you'd be learning responsibility and how to behave in
Sort
society.
of ethic, yeah, and they taught us how to behave, how to help other people, and I don't know, it's very simple, basic.
Well, you both bring lots of richness of culture from your own place to this place, and you feed these experiences of migration and crossing borders into a stage show called Border Stories. Perhaps the measure of any creative art act is the impact and how your creativity in turn inspires further creativity. Tom McFarland wrote this song and produced this booklet for children of all ages, and it's a kind of bird's eye view of migration.
The blackbirds and the thrushes and the robins sat around, discussing all the changes and what's been going down. I'm worried, said the robin, there's rumours in the air. I'm not sure what is happening, but I know that it's not fair. Have you ever wondered where the other birds have gone? There aren't so many here these days, I'm missing their sweet song. Some say it is the weather, some say it is the wind, but I think other forces are not letting them come in. We may have different feathers and sing a different song, but when we sing together, the differences are gone. If you look up in the sky, high above your head, all along the borders there's something being said. All the crows and magpies of the neighborhood are saying, we don't want you here, taking all our food. Living in the hedges and roosting in the trees, building mud huts on the walls and nesting in the eaves. They're stealing all our berries and eating all our bugs. We don't want for our lads here, they're just a bunch of thugs. We may have different feathers and sing a different song, but when we sing together, the differences are gone. Geese that come from Canada are told they can't come round, eating all the grasses and messing up the ground. All the swifts and swallows are not allowed to stay. Even all the starlings have been told to go away. But I for one like to hear their exotic cry. They sing another language as they're flying by. I think for all our children's sake it would be very sad if they didn't see the different really isn't bad. We may have different feathers and sing a different song, but when we sing together, the differences are gone. Now the blackbird and the thrushes and the robin all agreed they'd have to teach the others that there's no need for greed. For birds they don't see borders as they fly over the seas to find a place to feed their kids just like you and me. We may have different feathers and sing a different song, but when we sing together, the differences are gone. Sing a different song, but when we sing together, the differences are gone.
In between the summer days and the winter nights lies autumn, with its decadent twilight, orgy of colors. Ardent memories still sizzle under the skin, yet the mind has already turned to studies and genesis, digesting experience, analyzing experiments, wanting to know. We drink espresso with rum like Kerouac, dreaming of being on the road. The human rights are Western propaganda, whispered into our ears by Radio Free Europe. Lenin said that freedom is all your needs satisfied. We are free for we have food, work and shelter. We are free to watch TV and to have our culture. With jazz and gypsy music and rock bands, we have a Statue of Liberty like New York, only ours is better for it holds a palm leaf. We have all that we need. We have friends and we have spies. The walls have ears and we cannot hide from the menace of the establishment. But if we are good guys, all our needs will be satisfied. Just be quiet.
Well, you didn't want to be quiet and you moved out. Was that difficult? How did that happen?
Well, it was all done in secret because I couldn't tell my parents. I didn't want to tell my parents. And I had a red passport which was only valid for the Eastern Bloc. So I from Yugoslavia, I had to go illegally through the borders.
Was it scary at times?
Yes, it was scary.
Arriving late at the wrong address, a stranger in the street. Ali offers her a bed.
He lovingly treated her wounded knee that she had fallen on when searching the sky for the guiding star at the green borders to Italy.
Her nerves frazzled by the long march through the Alps on pills of caffeine and amphetamine, taken by the echoes of her throbbing heart when fate surged, and feeling so lucky for not looking like any one of the Red Brigade.
So grateful for a clean sheet after a week in ditches with crows and crickets, yet fearing horror dreams of her misconceptions, she fell into a black hole to be woken up by sunlight glinting on a tray of golden croissants brought up by Ali.
It's a lovely piece.
Phil, while Csilla was moving on her journey, you were beginning a journey in a sense as well. Were there many people from abroad living around Belik? Who was the first person from abroad that you may have met?
Strangely enough, the first person from outside would have been a soldier that I saw, and it was also the first black person I saw.
And where was he from?
England.
Right.
And no, you wouldn't have seen many foreigners unless they came from Ballyshannon, maybe down the road.
And did the soldier come to visit you?
No, what happened was, I think I was about 12 or 13, there were woods behind our house, and there were people shooting at the army, and the army were on patrol on the road past the house, and this man came to the door. I remember really clearly, it was a Saturday morning, and to tell us to stay in and not to come out because there was shooting going on. And I can remember our house has 2 steps going into it, and I was standing on the top step and I was still looking up at this giant, but it didn't really dawn on me that he had a rifle in his hand. It was just that he looked so strange, you know. But yeah, that was probably the first outsider that I would have seen. I was very rural. We were about a mile outside of the village of Belik, which is the mouth of the lake Bealeka, and we were, like I said, right on the border. And so we had a small farm. My father was a pottery worker, and we had a small field for hay, and then we also had a small piece of bog. So the hay field was actually in the north in Fermanagh, but the bog was in the south in Donegal. So there was lots of houses along there where the farms straddled the border.
And did you do some work?
Well, yes. Apart from bringing the tea up to the men with the bicycle, you know, kind of my mother would be making scones, and sort of when we were very small, we would occasionally be allowed on the top of the stacks of hay to take the hay up, and you had to work in the bog as well. Yeah, when they were bringing in, everybody seemed to have like a bank of turf, and that was a big adventure, especially when the turf was being brought home after it was dried. It had to come up the lane, which was the unapproved road, and no cars or tractors could travel, so it was always brought up on a donkey and cart. And of course the biggest deal was for the children if we could get sitting on top of it, you know, the whole way up. I could still remember that smell on a hot summer's day, you know. It's very, very evocative smell. Yeah.
So you come from a good deep earthy background.
It's funny, I talked to people in England who grew up on the stories of Sleeping Beauty and those stories, but we grew up on the rock that Finn McCool had thrown, and the fairies that were going to steal little Bridget and lose her in the bog, and if you didn't go to sleep, she'd take you as well. You know, up the Airy Mountain, down the Fairy Glen, You daren't go walking for fear of fairy men. It's still such a vivid picture in my mind.
So you're carrying a very old tradition as well, with the Mayflowers and
and in actual fact that's still done. The seasons were very much marked of the old Celtic year. So the Bridget's Cross is made for the 1st of February, and then on the May Eve we went to collect Mayflowers, and they were put on the windowsills and doorstep to keep evil away. And I was down with my mother very recently, and a neighbour brought her some Mayflowers on May Eve, so it's still been done. And the Mayflowers interestingly grew in that sheugh that was the border. It was the deepest sort of turfy stream around. And they were like big buttercups, the Mayflowers. And then, Lunas at the 1st of August, more harvest day. It wouldn't have been called Lunas so much as the harvest day just. And so it was the old seasons. And I still think of it that autumn begins on the 1st of August and summer at the beginning of May.
Were there any such magical beliefs or traditions in Hungary?
Yeah, so I grew up on the German tales, on the Grimm fairy tales, which are really bleak, and many of them are very scary for children, supposedly to scare the children, like in your...
You didn't need the Grimms to scare you around Fermanagh.
If you go into the forest, then you get lost, and then a witch takes you away, and all of that, so to scare you to stay at home.
People were very cruel to children, weren't they?
You had that forest as well. It
wasn't. It was. Well, to us it was a forest, but it was a small wood, a hazel wood that was just right at the back of the house, and Robin Hood lived in there, and the cowboys and Indians and stuff, and it was a real magical time of growing up, really, and it was all in your own imagination.
Yes.
And we could just go out our back garden and you were into the small wood.
And that's where the men were shooting out of it. Is it still there, that wood?
No, it was cut down not long after that soldier came, actually, and I always believed it was cut down because there were people shooting there. The farmer said he was clearing land for something or other, but it was convenient, so it's very open now, and because it didn't quite go down as far as the border, but near enough. And
well, your laneway. Was that an unapproved?
It was an unapproved road, yeah.
Did it get blown up?
It got blown up, yeah.
And the army blew it up?
There was something like 180 of them in Fermanagh. Because, if you think about Fermanagh, Belik is the most westerly point of the UK. And it's almost, it's close to the most westerly of Europe. So we're only 1 mile from the sea, really.
And how did that affect you when they...
Well, the border was actually on 3 sides. There was a man lived beside us.
You were hopping over the border every day.
Every day. There was a man beside us that if you went out the front door of the house, he was in the north, and if you went out the back door, he was in the south, which was very convenient. And it's still, you'd see smuggling of cattle going backwards and forwards. But what happened was, if you drive into Belik from my side, which is the Omagh side of the town, to get to the Enniskillen side of the village, you've got to go into the south. So there's about 100 yards in the south. So what they did was they blew up a bridge about 5 miles up the road so that the army couldn't easily get. So for the army to get from one side of the river to the other, they had to drive to Enniskillen to get back down again if they were staying in the north.
Right.
So it meant if you were going to visit our grandparents, my mother came from Ballyshannon, or comes from Ballyshannon, we had to sit through customs, and butter was smuggled one way and tea was smuggled the other way, and you could people who had cars on the street at the lane on the back road, the children there came to school with us, and then when we did the 11 plus, they went to school in Ballyshannon, we went to school in Enniskillen. So we've ended up with different accents and different culture. It's really interesting.
Well, you went to a boarding school in Enniskillen, and I read in your memoir where you didn't really live much after that in Belik. You moved on to university and so on. And you have a beautiful song, Phil, I'd love you to sing. I think it's referring to your father and remembering those times and so on.
Yeah, I'd be delighted. Yeah, it's called I Still Think of You. And it's, yeah, it was just... I still think of you sometimes, and I still feel you by my side. I still miss you, and I still wish you still were here. And I still think of you sometimes when bluebells ring and small birds find their voices earlier each day, and summer starts in May. I never knew you, not really well. I never knew you. And I still think of you sometimes, and I still wish that you could find a way to let me know just why you left. And I still think of you sometimes, and I still wish that I could find a way to let you know just how I cared. I never knew you, not really well. I never knew you. And I still think of you sometimes, and I still feel you by my side. I still miss you, and I still wish you still were here.
A song of remembering, featuring Fil Cambell, Csilla Toldy and the actress Vicky Blades from Border Stories, which is an animation fund project delivered with the aid of Newry Mourne and Down Council's Peace 4 programme. And they brought the production to audiences all around the council area. The idea of creating a safe place for sharing stories and remembering the troubles and fostering a better understanding and sense of relationship.
It was really well run, and the audience were extremely well engaged in the whole process, in the whole enjoyment of the event, particularly in the question and answer session at the end. There were a lot of very interesting points were raised. I find it very interesting because we have our own issues with a border here in Northern Ireland. It was very interesting to see perspective from someone else who had had the same experience with a land border, a geographical, political border. I also then, it led me on to think about the difference the lack of a border would have made to those lives, the physical freedom that it would have given, and what those lives might have been without that constriction.
To me, it was about overcoming the barriers in our minds, the most destructive borders of all. Instead of focusing on what separates us, things we're constantly reminded of, Border Stories was about what brings us together. And it showed the most powerful way to do that is through the mediums that move us: songs, music, poetry. Someone who escaped communist Hungary and someone who grew up on the Irish border around the time of the Troubles. Very different experiences of life. It was amazing by the end of the evening how much they'd found in common. And the lesson was clear: if them, why not us? The same performers put on an event inspired by that event for International Migrants' Day, was inspired by Border Stories, which was equally powerful. There were people from Vietnam, Italy, Hungary, Germany, Australia and more. People who now call us Rostrevor home. Each performed something, a poem or song or reading, that meant something to them. Again, it demonstrated that it is only the arts that can find that shared voice.
From quite a narrow, segregated Protestant expression of the community. I grew up in County Armagh, where the lambegs and the apple orchards are. I didn't have any exposure or wasn't even aware that Irish music, poetry, arts, any of that existed. So it was almost like this whole mysterious world was never presented to me until in 2011 I moved to Rostrevor, and that whole world suddenly was like opened wide to me. I was able to sing these songs and read this poetry and be invited into this story, this Irish story of part of my culture that I'd never had access to before. So I feel like the poetry, arts, music, all of that is so important in reminding us that we're human beings predominantly who share in a story of this land and the landscape that belongs to each of us, no matter what background we have. And that the power of music and arts really does break down divides. So programs like this are hugely important to remind us of the power of the arts and of music and just all of these efforts to bring peace and to remind us that first and foremost, we are brothers and sisters in humanity.
It helped me to open up and at the same time just to find ourselves here in this spot is important because we are both blown in.
Yeah.
From two ends and actually we found our home here in Rostrevor. Working with people who arrived not so long ago. So I came here more than 20 years ago and I have my experience and they are new here, so I actually can help them and I emphasize with what they feel and how they feel. But it's interestingly many of them want to go home, so they are still just in between, not like me. I feel I'm here at home.
I had gone away for a while as well and knew that feeling of not being welcomed. But Csilla, when she came here, knew the feeling of being welcomed.
I had a completely different experience because I was really welcome here and there.
So it became that, and that this is home where we are.
I had a dream of a place far, far away o'er the sea, where streets were pure gold, people opened their doors, and everyone's free to be free.
I left all I knew far behind. Family, friends, and my life. With memories dear held close to my heart. I faced out and never turned back.